And so I would like to introduce the panel moderator, well known to all of you and to the nation, Dave Minch, and I will let him introduce the members of our panel and let them tell you about the trust environment in California. Gentlemen.
Great, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. So you can see the panelists' names on the slides, and you know, I have to agree with Pam. You know, myself excluded, you are truly looking at the blue ribbon panel on trust here, and I'll tell you, it's been a kind of a whirlwind couple months as we've tried to gel the California Association of HIEs. But I want to start with a little bit of background. And that background is about trust. One of the things we tell new community HIOs that are trying to start up is you have to bring your community together. You have to get all of the players, the healthcare players in the community, to the table. And you have to start developing a circle of trust within that group. And a part of that is really just talking to each other. It's understanding what it is what are their requirements? What's their business model? What is it that they need to do? What is it they need to have from data exchange? And it's an interesting exercise because the things that are on the screen always come up. To begin with, if you're going to have a health information exchange, providers have to trust providers. I mean, there's just no other way around it. But actually, even before that, the patients have to trust the providers. And then, of course, everybody's got to be able to trust government. There's a lot of, people are afraid of the health plans of the insurance companies, and why are they? They're afraid the insurance companies are going to get that data and use it in ways that aren't good for the patients. Interestingly enough, that isn't what the health plans do. The health plans actually provide a tremendous service to the providers in helping them with coordination of the care of the patients. So there's got to be trust all the way around. And I came out, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think if you picture in your mind a teeter-totter, and at one end of the teeter-totter is the tremendous concern about privacy. If I'd have thought about this sooner, I would have put it on a slide. And at the other end of the teeter-totter is the health and well-being of every patient in California and every patient in the country. And the fulcrum of the teeter-totter can move. And the fulcrum of the teeter-totter actually is trust. So as we get more trust, the fulcrum will move away from the patient towards this concern about privacy, and it will take a heavier concern of privacy to offset the well-being of the patients. And hopefully, if we do nothing else, we can move that fulcrum so far that patients will finally stop worrying about the security of their data. They'll know the data is secure. They'll know we all collectively are doing everything we can to manage that data appropriately, and they'll start focusing on the benefit that data can provide. So to give you a little bit of an introduction, the California Association of Health Information Exchanges right now is a team of very bright, very enthused, very involved individuals representing, I think, some pretty heavyweight organizations in the state of California. I've got the logos up there, and I hope over the next probably month to 2 months we will attract virtually all of the functioning or even some in-planning health information organizations, and we're going to invite them to the table, invite them to join this, because we truly want this to be an organization that represents virtually all of the patients in California. It's extremely important for us, and actually I'm going to stop here and I'm going to ask, any ideas of what the green California is in our badges? What does it mean? Come on, some ideas. What's it mean? Hello, say again?
Eco-friendly.
Eco-friendly, absolutely. I want to be as eco-friendly as I can. Pam's idea was no paper. Yeah, so that's eco-friendly. Any other ideas? No other ideas? You didn't think about it very much, did you? This was a double dog dare. This was a challenge. So the CAHIE, Pam, where's Pam? How did you pronounce that? The CAHIE. The CAHIE vision, I haven't figured out how to pronounce it yet. It's create a California trust framework based on national standards and create pathways to ensure that all providers can use direct and exchange and actually have a pathway to be able to exchange data in California. So in short, what we really want to do is we want to completely eliminate interoperability white space in California. So the green is not white. There's no white space on the logo. I know, it's kind of strange, but that's the best we could do. The mission of the organization is to really establish a lightweight governance, to examine what's necessary and to create a multi-party trust agreement model that we can execute for California so that all of the parties involved can sign on to a single agreement, very much like the national DRSA trust agreement that allows organizations to connect nationally. And to really cooperate with and support those organizations nationally that are working on and developing governance across the country. So it's going to be an ambitious set of tasks. I think you've seen this picture at least 2 or 3 times, and you will notice the white space. It's actually not all rural. There are a lot of areas that are fairly well populated that aren't covered yet. But our intention is to address everything, both rural and urban areas. How are we going to do it? So the way we're going to do it is pretty simple. We're going to take, and you've seen this diagram hundreds of times, I'm sure. We're going to take the concept of the eHealth Exchange, formerly InWin, formerly InHIN, and we're going to duplicate it for California. We're going to, in fact, create a trust environment for all of California that allows us to exchange data under the California rules so that we don't have to have single agreements between all of the different organizations that want to exchange. It doesn't actually eliminate those agreements. In fact, the little yellow circles on this diagram will probably still exist because individual organizations will have reasons to exchange with each other for transaction patterns that are actually outside of the standard patterns for providing care. And those will continue to exist. But what we picture is probably a 3-layer, possibly there will be another layer. Again, we're, I think, a whole 2 months into this now, so we're still trying to figure out some of the details, some of the larger details. But we picture maybe a bronze level, a silver level, and a gold level, whereby the parties will be able to sign agreements and exchange data as long as everybody has signed and everybody has agreed to the trust requirements and everybody has gotten a certificate. They can exchange transactions even if they have never exchanged before. Hopefully they will have met, but even if they haven't met, they still will be able to exchange. So if you think about it, it's kind of the promise of the NHIN way back at the beginning, and we're going to try and actually leapfrog what the nation has done by the work that we're setting out to do with this group. So that's an introduction to CAHIE, and with that, I think I'm going to sit down and let each of our panelists introduce themselves. Let's go over there and start with Bill Behe. Just kind of introduce yourself and what your organization is, and then we're going to ask some questions.
You bet. Thanks, Dave. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm not really. Let me hold this up higher. How about now? Thanks. I'm the CIO for Santa Cruz Health Information Exchange. We've been operating that exchange since 1996. It's one of the oldest in the country. I keep hearing that we are the oldest, and I keep saying, no, we are one of the oldest. Because there were about a dozen that started in that mid-90s time frame. And I'm really pleased to be part of this, this effort. Just 3 years ago, I'm reminded at the Redwood MedNet that a group of people led by Will Ross and Laurie Hack said, hey, let's get together and see if Santa Cruz and Kaiser and Orange County and a couple of other organizations that don't normally connect in any way could connect and share patient information using NHIN protocols. And in about 8 weeks we did. So for those of you that were there, you saw it, and I think it's probably still on the internet today as a video recording. So it showed me 3 years ago that it really was possible. We literally pulled this together in a matter of weeks. Of course, we used dummy patients, but we did use the real NHIN protocols, and it works into the EMRs and into the various different health information exchange platforms. Every one of the platforms was different. So it is possible, and I'm impatient. I went and joined this group in San Diego. When we had our meeting that turned out to be our organizational meeting, and I said, okay, and people that know me know that I'm both impatient and cranky, and I'm like, okay, come on, we did this 3 years ago. Why aren't we in production yet? What are the barriers? So we spent a lot of the day talking about how we're going to break down the barriers and get into production. And I'm really encouraged by what appears to be 25 to maybe 30 organizations that are in some stage of signing up for this effort, and are committing to be able to share information safely, securely, using the national protocols through the healthy way, and get onboarded. So I'm super excited to be part of the effort, and wish all of you will join us either by joining the effort directly or by supporting your local health information exchange that should be joining this effort, because for one thing, it's not cheap and it's not free. So there are resources that this will take, and we need to put a lot of wood behind the arrow, or a few arrows, and move forward. So I'll stop there, but just you can tell how excited I am at this effort.
And you're not cranky yet?
I'm not cranky yet.
Jim.
Okay, I'm Jim Colleen. I represent the San Diego Beacon Project. It was we consider ourselves the new kids on the block. The ONC funded our project from many small, different state-of-the-art demonstration projects that includes John Madison and the Kaiser connecting to the VA using NewHIN. And so we've brought all of these partners together and created a regional health information exchange. And with that, we believe that we've, at least with the latest technology, been able to do some leapfrogging. So we're very proud. And, like I said, we're the new kids on the block. So we're taking as many hits and learning as fast as we can.
John.
John Madison, Kaiser Permanente. I just want to say two things. One is I want to thank Pam. Where'd Pam go? There she is in the back, for being the brains behind convening this Blue Ribbon panel and launching it in a way that it's just taking off amazingly. So this panel wouldn't be where we were today without Pam's help. The second thing I want to say is in the audience are quite a few others who are on this Blue Ribbon panel called California HIE, and including Will Ross, who's already been mentioned. If I could ask all of you that have participated in this to please stand up so that the others at the table will know who to grab.
Come on, guys.
Stand
Don't
up.
be shy.
Stand up.
There we go.
Thanks.
Chris.
I'm Chris Yeager, CMIO for Sutter Health. I thought we were the newbies on the block. As many of you know, we're an integrated delivery network in Northern California. We have 24 acute facilities, over 24 surgery centers, about 5,000 physicians, both in foundation model and aligned IPAs, and lots of foundations on our medical staffs who are not aligned, just truly independent. We're an Epic shop and are live at all of our foundations with Epic, and live at 10 of our 24 hospitals with Epic, with plan to be complete with our rollouts by the end of 2015. And at that point, we'll be the largest single instance of Epic in the country internationally. So we have a lot of sharing within our system, but our sharing with those outside our system is limited to the Care Everywhere platform right now. And we do a good job with that. It's just the tip of the iceberg there. We shared about 30,000 outbound last year and about 6,000 inbound, and are on pace to do a lot more than that this year, with over 60 other organizations across the country. But we're right now shopping for and contracting for a vendor HIE solution to help us really extend to those other EHRs and HIEs across the state and across the country. Our perspective about HIE is really from the patient's perspective. We fully realize and fully support our patients getting care from outside the walls of Sutter Health. Again, we're community-based, but we have a large relationship with all the independent providers and even our competitors, whether it be patients going to other acute facilities, FQHCs, academic medical centers, dialysis centers, SNFs, whatever it may be. We want to connect with them so that our patients really have the benefit of a comprehensive record. We want to empower our patients and help move our quality agenda forward, and help improve the health of our communities. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. So the way we're going to do this is I get to have the first question, and then if that stirs you and you want to kind of follow it up, we'll take questions from the audience. If there's nothing, then we'll go on to the second question and so on. But I do get to have the first question, and I'm going to ask the question that's probably right now pretty much at the top of all of your minds. So, Bill, I'm going to ask you to respond first to this, and then the panel can pick up as they want. So how is this effort different from the past efforts? For example, we had, what was that organization? Oh, CalRio. We had CAKE, Cali Connect. We've kind of had some other efforts to break down the silos. And so what's different here? Why is it that we think this will succeed?
Well, that's a tough one, Dave. We didn't rehearse this, did we? Okay, now I'm a little nervous.
I told you I was going to be a little controversial. I mean,
good job. Well, I think
Time to get cranky.
I think a lot of things have changed over the last 5 or 6 years, especially as it pertains to health information exchange. We really didn't have, outside of the pure NHIN, which was only about, I think, a dozen participants, for years, we didn't have the notion of trust in terms of a broad scale of trust. We had trust inside of a community like what exists in much of Santa Cruz, where people know each other. It's a small community, and the doctors trust each other. And but we didn't have this notion of national or regional trust, and I think that is one of the biggest things that has changed. And I would challenge you to look at some of the work that's being done here with what was the Western States Consortium around trust, as well as the Healthy Way work on trust, because it's a very broad, it's a very simple word, but it has very broad implications. So I'd say it's trust.
So one thing I'd like to add in terms of what's different. So this former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, was fond of saying that all politics is local, and I think you can paraphrase that and say all trust is local. And so what you're looking at in this new organization is the people who are building trust locally. And trust doesn't scale well, but if you build trust from the ground up, you can actually begin to scale it. Trust from the top down is a very difficult thing to achieve. So what the national standards around interoperability provide are the technical framework for exchanging information, but really the development and sustenance for trust is very much of a local issue. So what's really different about this initiative in a really big way is that all the leaders of this initiative are people who are dealing with trust issues at a local level and working together to begin scaling that trust up. And I think that's a more natural pathway. And I think if you ask anybody who's on this team, and others are welcome to join as soon as they're ready, the confidence that this effort is going to deliver what the state of California and the citizens of California needs is very, very high.
Excellent, thank you. Other thoughts?
Yes. You know, the biggest change I think that's happened now is the environment, both political as well as technical. Over the last 5 years, there's been some technical standards that have certainly improved the interoperability, as John has just mentioned. And so it builds that trust network, but also the politics have changed. No longer can healthcare systems stay siloed. They know that patients travel. They know that the data patients want has to go with them. And so I think that environment, the political environment, has changed. As well as, you know, on the national level with many of the federal agencies. They've realized that. They've opened up doors. They've allowed data to come through that's never come through before over the last 3 years. So I think the environment has really been a good momentum changer.
Yeah, I think I'd add to the part of the environment is the patient's perspective, their expectations. As increasing consumers, and their perspective is growing as consumers, they really expect and demand that kind of portability of their information and sharing among their care providers. And that, of course, has significant power across our organizations as care providers. They're forcing us to trust each other. They want that kind of trust. They trust the providers who they choose to go see, and they want us to trust each other. And I think that's forcing us to work together more and get that common framework.
Great. Anybody have any questions up? Larry, I think we have a microphone coming from this direction over here. Oh, okay, go ahead. You got one close to you.
Hi, Andy Patterson with the California Primary Care Association. We represent the 900 nonprofit community clinics and health centers across the state of California and the 5 million plus patients that they serve. So this is really exciting, and we've been following the health information exchange conversation since it began. And I know that my members will say, so what? And what does it mean for me? What does it mean for St. Anthony's Free Clinic in San Francisco? What does it mean for Open Door Health Centers up in Eureka that you have this association? How does that help a local FQHC or a clinic on the ground connect? And not to disparage what you're doing, I think it's great, but.
I'll take a quick shot at that. So at the break, I would encourage you to talk to Will Ross, who's already done a lot of that very kind of work very effectively in his area. I was recently invited to join the board of Calypso, and one of their primary goals is to address precisely the question that you just asked. And so it's my intent as a board member of Calypso to do everything I can to help the safety net take advantage of these kind of services. And I've spent a lot of my career working in volunteering in safety net environments, and so I have a long-standing commitment to help in that space. So stay tuned.
Bill, do you want to say something?
Sure. Excellent question. We must have planted that one. There's actually so much benefit that will be derived from this. I want to just tell you a real quick local story. We work with a really fantastic safety net clinic called Salud por la Gente, and for 2 years we've been really struggling. They serve a large migrant population for the migrant farm workers, and they keep telling me, how are we going to allow information that's in our system to be pulled when the migrant worker moves down south, depending on what season they're working in. And it's really been crazy because I know the answer. but the barriers around trust and cost and technology and getting everybody moving in the same direction have prevented us from doing it. So, you know, that's one. There's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of how making this information accessible will improve healthcare at FQHCs, at primary care, all over the place.
So from our perspective in San Diego, we actually have council members on our board from the FQHCs. The way that we look at it, the biggest improvement that the FQHCs have, whether they join or not, or whether they can or they're in line to get on board, is that it improves the population health. And by doing that, you're improving the health of everyone. And so that's the first benefit I think that they'll start seeing.
Good. We have Larry.
So I'm really glad to see that you guys come together on this, and I think that your focus on trust is really important. One of the challenges that we have in news is that it tends to focus on the negative. So you get a laptop stolen and 50,000 people's information lost. You get several million people's information compromised in the UK. So you have all these news stories that are negative, and you don't necessarily have to have an answer for this today, but I think it's something that you need to spend some time thinking about is how do you counter all the negative things that are going to be chipping away at trust if you want to build trust, particularly with the public?
I'm actually going to take that one first. You know, it's really interesting, and I used the analogy earlier of the teeter-totter and where the fulcrum is. I think we have to start doing some very good things with Exchange. Because I think the proof is in the pudding. People are concerned, and they have every right to be concerned, that all of us do the best job we can with security. But I will tell you that security won't ever be perfect. It is for every one of us that is doing our best to envision all of the different kinds of attacks and different vulnerabilities in our systems, there are probably 10 or 15 people out there that are doing the same kind of thing to figure out how to penetrate. So at the end of the day, yeah, security won't be perfect, but I don't think we need to be concerned about it. I don't think we need to wait. I think we need to do the best job we can, and we need to start providing some very real results at the other end of the teeter-totter, to the extent that patients start worrying less about the security. You know, there will be breaches, they'll be in the news, but they'll say, you know, gee, it is what it is, but I'm getting so much value out of having my data available and exchanged that I'm not going to worry about it. And I think that's actually how we impact change.
And I'd like to add, it's very much of a social issue, as Dave has alluded to, and I think education is really critical. So it's incumbent upon all of us as HIT and HIE professionals to be well educated on how this balance is struck and how the fulcrum of the teeter-totter needs to move, and to have those discussions with others. So I did not plan this, but since Larry asked the question and has written 2 chapters in this book on the topic, published by HIMSS, Information Privacy and the Evolving Healthcare Environment. Larry and I have both been paid in full 3 copies of the book, not a penny otherwise. But it covers a lot of those issues, and I recommend it as a way for us to be educated and help advocate for what we're doing at Health Information Exchange, the balanced view, because there is no such thing as absolute security, and there will always be breaches. And to the extent that the public is waiting for the perfect security solution, that will never happen. To the extent that we're doing everything humanly possible to improve care while protecting the sanctity and privacy of the data, we will succeed. So every one of us in this room really has an obligation to advocate on behalf of the improvement of public health and individual health through HIE.
I fully echo everything John said, and would add that the patients have their responsibility as well. One of the challenges is that patients have varying expectations, and even a single patient may have varying expectations over time about how their data should be protected, depending on perhaps what their health status is and what's going on with them. And then we as providers or insurers have different expectations or beliefs about what our patients' expectations may be, and we lack that common expectation level leveling. So I think the more we can educate the broad community, including the patients, about how we protect information and what the patient's role is in that. For example, their risk of breach might be higher from a familiar perpetrator, in a divorce situation than it is from some stranger trying to hack their information. How do we educate them that when they get a divorce, they need to change their access code for their health information just like they change their credit cards? The patients don't do that now. So it really is a community outreach and education opportunity.
Yeah, good point. Any other questions?
Two more back here.
Frank Acker, I'm the medical director for Xerox State Healthcare. We process Medi-Cal fee-for-service claims and do a bunch of other stuff with the state. My question has nothing to do with that current role. Looking over the horizon of the future, as you get rid of the white space, and you've got access to information or vice versa out in the community to patients that have been seen in your entities. But let's say they've been outside, they come in and they come into your emergency room. Are you thinking about how to push automatically that information down into the providers who are taking care and seeing the patients in the emergency room so they look at the information that's out there about the patients that they're seeing, so they don't duplicate services, so they know everything about the patient and know about the comorbidities?
I'll take this one. So the answer to your question is yes. A lot of our work is just getting started. We have initiated a project where using just simple registration information when a patient walks into a health system, we can grab that on the HIE and actually use direct to push that out to the provider that says, yes, I want to know about my patient hitting a health system, whether it's within their network or without their network. And so we then leave it to the provider to then do the query to get the patient information. Yeah.
You're going to need to push the provider. I suspect you're going to need to educate and push
Yes.
the docs to, hey, do this automatically.
You are correct. You are correct. But it's interesting how acceptable this is, and the providers want it. They want to know where their patients are, and they want to know when they go into a hospital and out of hospital.
And if you asked us to look over the horizon, so I'll look a little bit further. And William Gibson famously said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And in Boston today, they've published results of what's called an open notes project, where as soon as every note is generated with anybody with an electronic health record who's participating, it's pushed to the patient's personal health record so that they have direct access to it themselves. So if you imagine this model propagating across the country, which I hope and expect it will, we're certainly looking at that opportunity ourselves right now at Kaiser Permanente. But if you look at what it may look like in the future, the ability to have every individual have access to their record simultaneously with the authentication of the note, I think that's a trend that we can expect to grow and address a lot of this issue, in addition to direct push to providers. But while we're on the issue of push versus the query response model, as a patient myself, it's more than likely that the next time I end up in an emergency room, it's going to be because of one of my spectacular falls while snowboarding, or because of a diving injury on the far side of Catalina, and I'll probably arrive by helicopter. And when I arrive in an ED, it's just as likely to be, if I arrive in a Kaiser facility, I'm good, because no matter where I go in a Kaiser facility, we're covered. But if I arrive outside of one of those facilities, I really want to know that they've got my name and my ID before I land, and they've already pulled my records so that when I arrive, they know everything about me they need to know. That's what I want as a consumer. So I think push has a lot of interesting use cases and roles, but the most likely scenario where I will end up needing that kind of information urgently is more of a query response kind of opportunity, and I think the open notes is going to fill in some of the gaps. But as Dave mentioned at the outset, this entire group, not just the panel here, but those in the audience and those that are participating, is dedicated to eliminating white space by by broad deployment and support for everyone, including the safety net clinics, to participate through the national Healthy Way query exchange model so that you can go end up anywhere in California and be able to get information from anywhere else. And there are scores of other organizations around the country lined up to do the same. So first, our primary charter is eliminating white space in California, but every one of us is active in some way in the national scene to help everyone else eliminate their white space as well.
I think there's another a really good push example that I heard recently. It's from Maryland, a little bit smaller state with a lot fewer hospitals, but the Health Information Exchange there, named CRISP, managed to build a system where they've got all of the ADT feeds from all of the hospitals in the state, which again is a lot easier than California, just on logistics, and they're pushing a direct message to the doctor of record for that patient when the patient arrives at the emergency room or is an inpatient, admitted as an inpatient. So it's a really interesting, novel use of push to alert the care team and alert the patient's doctor, because in a lot of cases the doctor's not getting alerted in California anyway, and it helps them provide better treatment.
I would add, I think, on the horizon where we need to be is not just pushing when a patient arrives, it's at any transition, whether it's an arrival or leaving a facility. Leaving an acute care facility and going to a SNF, or a SNF going to home. If we're only limiting ourselves to face-to-face encounters being when we get the information, we're doing ourselves a disservice as well as our patients. To really coordinate their care and manage the care, we want to know when they leave an acute facility so that we can actually start managing that transition much more appropriately.
I'll just add one more short use case, and that's to really give John the best care while he's in the helicopter. What we really want to do is we really want the care team that's in the helicopter to be able to say, oh, here's his identity. I can actually get his records, because if I met with the emergency medical services in Contra Costa County, and we were talking about ambulances, but so much of the critical care is delivered within the first few minutes, even before the patient gets onto the ambulance. And I personally was very surprised at what all goes on as the patient is being triaged and prepared to be loaded in the ambulance. And the critical thing that they need, almost universally, they've told me, is they need that information. They need to know some basic things about the patient. So that's a query model. That's a model that says, if I can get any information, any identity information about the patient, I love the idea of using facial recognition. That was so cool yesterday. Facial recognition. And it would be so easy to do. Take a camera, take an iPhone, take a snapshot. The facial recognition software is very prevalent and very good. And they could take a picture. Oh, that's John Madison. And bam, his information can come in. So that's really a query example. Another question?
Let me just add one other thing quickly to that. So I haven't yet been life flighted in as a patient, but I've flown hundreds of life flight. I was a life flight critical care doc for years and flew hundreds of missions picking up people like me who have spectacular falls. And so that information would be absolutely invaluable in transit. And I want to ask Jim to speak to that, because he's leading an initiative to do precisely that in San Diego through the Beacon community.
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that we've been able to do, one of our main goals is cardiovascular care, and actually pre-hospital cardiovascular care. A good portion of the EMS agencies that are out there in the state are all on an electronic platform. One of the things that we've done is we've taken their record, standardized it, translated it, and so we can actually push that across into the hospital systems in electronic format now. One of the main goals is that we actually obtain the EKGs by cellular 3G network. And so the cardiologists and the ED physicians can actually grab those EKGs before the patient even gets in the truck. And so they can either say, yes, this is a STEMI, or no, this is not a STEMI. And one of the major successes that we've shown so far is not how quick they can get onto the table, because they can get onto the table very quickly. It's when of those false positives can you just say, nope, this is not a STEMI? Because that's real cost savings. It's patient safety, because they don't have to incur a dye going to do this whole procedure, and it's cost savings for the health systems because they don't have to waste the money aggregating all their teams ready for this patient to come in who really doesn't have an active MI. And so we are very proud of that. And this is the first step. Our main goal is to get the paramedics to get that HIE information. And so we're working on that.
So just to highlight, just to mobilize the cath team is a very expensive proposition. So what Jim has already shown is that we're saving tons of money by not falsely mobilizing that team at great cost.
All right. So I think I did see another question out there. Yes.
Sure. I'm Mark Branding. I'm spent a lot of time with Scripps Health, and don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about consumer-mediated exchange. I am going to ask you about, you all have electronic medical records. When patients come in, how many times are the patients asking you about your security and your trust, et cetera? How worried are they when they see an electronic medical record?
I'll take that first. So, and thank you, Mark. That was great.
You're welcome, Jim.
Well, you know, so I'm still very active in the emergency department. I work my normal shifts, and every time I go to see a patient, whether they work at whether they're a VA patient, whether a community patient, or both, a combination, they never ask about security. They said, "Why can't you get my records now?" and so the biggest component is, you know, the expectation of the patient. They don't, you know, they're not concerned about that. It's just like banking. They want the information to go so that they can have better care.
I echo that. I'm a hospitalist, and when I see patients in the emergency department to admit them, they just assume I can access electronically their record, even if it's a paper record in a doc's office. It has nothing to do with Sutter. So their expectation is that we have that information.
So I had a conversation with Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of HHS, a couple of years ago, where she had sort of a small town hall meeting at one of the HIMSS conferences. And what I suggested to her is that we're talking about consumer-centric healthcare, we're talking about healthcare reform, but what's really going to happen very soon is consumer-centric healthcare reform. And the way it happens is the people who've come into Jim's ED and into Sutter and any institution that has a record are going to be so accustomed to having everything at the fingertips of their doctor that when they go anywhere else that's not up to speed with both an electronic health record and HIE, they're going to say, I don't want to get my care there. I don't trust you because you don't have a health record and HIE, not because I'm concerned about the risks of HIE and privacy, but because you can't take good care of me. So I think we're going to see a huge wave, and Clay Christensen highlights the fact that most major disruptions in markets are consumer-driven. And so I believe we're on the cusp of a consumer-driven healthcare reform because our patients are going to accept nothing less than what we're offering.
My question is about, I thought it was great, the different types of trust that are required for health information exchange that Dave showed at the beginning. And my question is about provider-to-provider trust. And obviously, healthcare is a business, and it's a very competitive business, and there's competition for patients underlying the competitive forces in this business. My question is, to what extent, in your experiences with with health information exchanges, with health information exchange? Have you seen those competitive drivers between large and small organizations, with competitive concerns between large organizations who are competitors of each other, for them to participate in health information exchange initiatives? To what extent have you seen in reality those kinds of concerns impeding health information exchange efforts? And what do you think can be done, to the extent you have seen it, what do you think can be done to increase the level of trust to overcome those challenges?
Good question, and I'm going to take that one first. HealthShare Bay Area had, I think, had that exact experience. We had essentially the very large institutions got together, and we had everybody at the table, and we started building the trust. We did what I tell all communities, organizations to do, is gather people together, get the trust going. It's an interesting process when you look at the business models, and the fact is, the large provider organizations are not unwilling to trust each other, but they have to know that the data that they're sharing is safe, that the data is not going to be used in a competitive fashion against them. And probably most importantly, they have to have the business wiring, if you will, to understand that the sharing is necessary. I was going to put back up the slide that we had that showed all the different organizations that are involved. With HealthShare Bay Area, we not only had the large organizations, but we had the community clinic organizations. We had the one in the East Bay and the one in San Francisco. And that's an entirely different model. They are starving for data. They need to have information. And the patients literally travel all around San Francisco and are all around the East Bay. And so their need for information is tremendous. And there is a natural tension between that need and the need for the large organizations to have solid business models to make sure they can compete in this industry. And as those of you who know the Bay Area know that it's a very competitive environment. And I think what this shows, what this organization shows, is the time is right. And in fact, if we can get all of the organizations, the major healthcare systems in the state, to the point where they are comfortable with each other, and had you been in that first meeting in San Diego, the level of trust that they walked into the room and had with each other within the first hour was tremendous. And it's because they're all familiar with the trust environment from the national perspective of the Data Use and Reciprocal Support Agreement, or the DURSA. They've all looked at it, they've all signed it, they're all either onboarded or will be onboarded to the eHealth Exchange. And so consequently now they have a mindset of trust. And I think that's really the core, and that's what we're trying to replicate for California, is that core trust environment where the large providers can trust each other, and then the small providers can connect to that through direct, and connect to it through a partner. If they don't have the eHealth Exchange capability themselves, they can go through a partner, a community health information exchange, or perhaps a private HIO that is willing to take on other partners. And I think we will see a tremendous variety of that in California as time progresses. So getting that trust and provider-to-provider trust agreement, I think the anchor for that is this multi-party trust agreement that we're putting together.
Yeah, I was going to say that the work that the CHHS is leading on the MMPA, the participant agreement, is a move in that direction too, because it calls out what are the possible uses of the data. So I think what providers are concerned about and what organizations are concerned about is, well, how could this data be used, if you will, against us in an anti-competitive or something that would hurt their competitive position. And both the MMPA that California is developing, as well as the DRSA and even the agreement with these organizations about the restrictions on the use of data should begin to satisfy those competitive concerns, because we do hear them in a number of places.
I just want to make one quick plug for the DRSA. So there's a lot of folks who pick at one little nit or another in the DRSA. This is a federal document created by some really talented people after years and months of grueling debate. And there should be nothing in that national document that people find objectionable. There may be additional things that people want to add. So what Dave laid out in the introduction is a model that we're adopting, where the base DRSA is something that every one of us has either accepted or is about to sign. And we would encourage those of you, if you have any issues with it, realize that those can be addenda in whatever relationships where they're appropriate. But starting off as a base, that is the cleanest, fastest path to eliminating white space across the state of California, is to get everybody on board with that document. And it's really outstanding as a base platform.
I think two other things add to the change as well. One is, again, I speak from our organization, there was certainly skepticism about how data could be used against us if we shared with others, dating back years, and it's evolved over time. And part of it's observing what's been going on nationally and seeing that that's not necessarily the case. And the second comes back to what John said so well earlier about that consumer-driven perspective. It's not so much what your competitors are going to use your data against you, it's what your consumers aren't going to want to come to you if you don't let them have their data. It's their information. They want it shared freely. We should share it.
Great.
I wanted to take off on what the question Mark asked earlier of when a patient comes into an institution to be treated, about their concerns about data, or do they have any concerns. And I think that universally, 99.9%, when we're in a situation where we need health care, that we really want that data to be available. I think that's what we heard. And I, of course, couldn't speak to that because I don't see patients directly, but the others that do see patients were able to speak to it. But I want to add that when you get out of that treatment situation and you go to a patient, and I have talked to a lot of patients and said, do you have any concerns about this? That universally, the concerns that they have are not about their provider or their institution that they're working with, but their concerns are, if this data can be used against me, I don't want it shared. If this data can be used to deny me a job, if it can be used to deny me insurance, then I don't want to share it. So, you have those two sides. In a treatment relationship, yes, I want all my data shared. And when you take a subset of patients, it's a pretty small population that are adamant about not sharing, and it's usually one of those two things. And there are some other good things about concerns about domestic abuse, or I know people in the healthcare system, I'm afraid they'll look at my data. There's some minor things, but the biggest concerns are those two. And unfortunately, I don't think that's anything that we should try to tackle or can tackle. Unfortunately, I think it's a federal or maybe even a state level thing that says we cannot discriminate against people. If someone gets denied a job because their health status was learned through any means, that should not be possible.
While we're mentioning a couple of times the consumer's right, the individual person's right to see their data, I think we'd be remiss not to call out the extraordinary work that both Regina Holliday, who's over here painting, and ePatient Dave have done to really historically advance the cause. The two of them have really moved the needle at a national level in an extraordinary way. And Regina's giving the closing keynote. So if any of you were thinking of ducking out a little bit early, I would encourage you to stay. Her story is compelling. The contribution she's made to this space is absolutely astonishing.
Great. Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I was very pleased to see that you referenced direct trust in your mission. I want to say a couple of words about Direct Trust, for those of you who haven't heard about it. Direct Trust is a national membership, nonprofit organization which is developing business and technical standards to enable trust communities. In other words, to enable interoperability. Direct Trust has also established an accreditation program for HISPs, for certification authorities, for registration authorities, all very mysterious enterprises for a lot of you, and certainly for me before I joined Direct Trust. Anyway, accreditation, which doesn't guarantee, but signifies that these organizations are abiding by Direct Trust's standards. I chair the Consumer and Patient Participation Work Group, which is one of 4 work groups at Direct Trust. And our work group's job is to ensure the consumer voice in Direct Trust. I would like to encourage all of you, and certainly encourage the California Association of Health Information Exchanges and all of your distinguished members to check out directtrust.org. And for those of you who are looking for a HISP to take you to the national level, I would also love to encourage you to look for HISPs that have been accredited by Direct Trust. The first HISP has just been accredited this week, and there are 8 in the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I saw one other question. No? Oh, there it is.
Thank you. And it sounds like my question may be answered a little later in the day, but as a patient, which we all are at one point or another, and I've managed a chronic disease for 13 years. I've had rheumatoid arthritis, and I've had to make health system changes numerous times. The ability to take my own information with me when I go from one system to the next, and I'm not picking on anybody, but I last year moved into Kaiser, and first time for me, and I have had to start over every process, including questioning my diagnosis at that system. So I really am a strong supporter of being able to own my own information and take it with me when I go from one system to another. And I personally believe that if I have the better ability to do that, some of these issues start being lessened because the consumers are going to drive that need for the information in the exchange. And the more that we can do that on our own, I think that's going to support the work that you all are trying to do and opening up those systems, protecting the data, but opening up the access. But if I had the ability to just take that with me and say, here's my history in an easy way, that's going to improve my care as well. So it does sound like that may be addressed a little later in the day. So I don't really have a question, but more of a comment.
Let me turn it into a question real quickly about the Blue Button and iBlue Button, which is designed to do that. So the Blue Button was a federal initiative emerging from the VA to give ASCII text files for the consumer to carry from place to place. And quite honestly, that never got me very excited. The iBlue Button initiative uses the CCD and hopefully the full CDA standards that we're using for the full query response and health information exchange through HealthyWay, and Direct is using the same standards. So to the extent that vendors emerge, and there are already several great vendors emerging in this space that allow you to do that, I think that will satisfy the very important legitimate requirement you just made. I would hasten to add that were your prior institution, don't name them please, but your institution prior to Kaiser capable of sending a CCD to your doctor at Kaiser, they would have had everything in a nanosecond because we have the capability to send and receive, but we can't receive from someone who can't send.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's better to send than to receive, but we do both.
Good question over there.
So Dave, maybe this has been answered, but just when I look up here at this screen and I see all these organizations, and I've been, patient in several of these institutions in Northern California, are you telling me that everybody here is sharing and exchanging information currently? So if I land in an ED at Dignity and I'm a Sutter patient, all my information can come with me. And then my next question is, to follow up on that, how does somebody get involved in California Association of Health Information Exchanges and help you advance this cause?
Well, I'll take the first question. I think all of the organizations that you see up there are sharing in some respect. Okay, actually, with the exception of my own HealthShare Bay Area, we're still a sleeping bear. We're in hibernation, we're waiting to come out. They all are sharing information to some extent, but all of that sharing right now is by and large either through the vendor's capability, the Epic capability, or it's through point-to-point contracts, point-to-point agreements between two parties. What we're trying to do, if you look at this and they're kind of arranged around the screen, think of this if we had to make point-to-point connections to each one of these organizations and then multiply the number of organizations up there by 4. And think of all the lines you'd see. What we're trying to do is create more of the STAR concept where we have all of them connecting to kind of this central agreement. And once we have this agreement in place, that sharing can go on throughout all of the organizations without further having to have point-to-point agreements. And I think that's one of the real keys.
And I'll add on top of that any of those organizations who are a member of either Healthy Way nationally or the Continuity of Care Consortium, CCC, that includes Mayo Clinic, Kaiser Permanente, Group Health Cooperative, Kaiser, and Intermountain Healthcare. And we're onboarding another major provider into CCC soon. I'm not sure I'm at liberty to release their name yet, but they include a lot of safety net providers in the next member of that group. And so we have exchanged between all of those parties across the country, and any of these member institutions who have onboarded to Healthy Way can exchange directly with each other under the conditions of the DRSA, and many have done so. So there is a generic exchange mechanism through these national mechanisms that we are, as a group, are promoting as foundational to eliminate the white space.
I'll try and take a crack at your next question. I don't know that I can answer it fully because I don't know that we're old enough to have figured all of that out yet. But how do people get involved? We do have, thanks to Karen's effort on the Cal Ojai website, we have a separate page that should have gone up this morning, I think, for the CAHIE. And it's apparently up on the screen over there somewhere.
Oh, on that screen.
Oh, it's on the big screen. No, that's the organizations. So we do have a place in there for you to indicate that you're interested in joining or in participating. We intend this organization to be very open, very transparent in terms of the work we're doing, and we'll have we'll hopefully have a way for people to listen into meetings and certainly to join the organization very soon. Hopefully, maybe even this afternoon when we have our face-to-face meeting here.
Can I add one thing to that, Dave?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, just real quickly, there was unanimous and emphatic agreement around the transparency in this organization. So one of the first questions was, how does this differ than priors? There were some issues with transparency in the past. There were issues around monetizing data and business models for prior HIEs. And I think it's safe to say that every member of the group so far, and hopefully every new entrant to the group, is adamant about transparency and adamant about not monetizing the data in any way, shape, or form in any of the participants in this exchange. And that's an important foundational commitment that everybody has.
Yeah, good point.
I got the 5 minutes to go sign, and what I'd like to do is, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to have all of the other members, because we kind of just picked 5 of the group and kind of put them up here on stage as a representation. But I really would like to have all of the other members. You guys stood up earlier. I'd like to have everybody come up onto stage right now. And actually, I'd like to do that and just kind of have a photo op for the group, because this group, this group really went to great lengths to meet and to get organized. And so anyway, you guys come up. Come on, Will. Come on, Will. Close your laptop.
Please make your way up to the stage, whether you want to or not.
Yes, I'd like to have everybody come up, and while they're coming up, I want to tell you how, to what lengths people went through to actually join the group. Will Ross traveled the farthest from Redwood MedNet to San Diego via Phoenix. And when Will got to Phoenix, he found out that he couldn't actually make the meeting in time by getting on another airplane. So what he did was he teamed up with a few other people that he had never met before that happened to be on the flight that was supposed to land in San Diego, and they drove all night so that he could get there in the morning. So that tells you a little bit about to what great lengths these guys went to get this process going.
And talk about trust. He slept in the back seat of a car that somebody else was driving. He just met at the airport. There was a real trust bundle in that car.
So please join with me in a very robust round of applause for these folks who have taken an idea from 3 years ago and turned it into something that's working.